Shabbat Shalom, everyone. I hope you're doing well. This week's Parsha is Metzora. So last week's Parsha was Tazria. Metzora is the one that comes after it. And oftentimes when I know these Parshiyot are coming up, I get a little anxious because Tazria and Metzora are about Tzara'at, which is like the physical skin disease that we sometimes translate as leprosy. It wasn't exactly leprosy because it's a spiritual disease you get when you commit a certain group of sins. And I don't like talking about it because it reminds me of COVID, because these Parshiyot, of course, happened around COVID time. And in these Parshiyot, they talk about quarantining outside the city limits, and it just gives me PTSD. And I just don't want to talk about quarantining and COVID anymore. But what I do want to talk about is the types of things that you do or in biblical times to have gotten this disease. So I want to read the examples of what they are. So the Talmud lists 7 possible causes for tzara'at. The first one, the most famous one, is lashon hara, which is speaking malicious gossip. The next one is murder. The next one is a vain oath. The next is being prideful. The next is theft. And the next one is miserly behavior or not being generous. I think those are fascinating examples of things that you can do to have this physical manifestation of this spiritual sin. These are all, to our fellow humans. They're not about God at all. I mean, they really don't have anything to do with God at all. Of course they do, because if we recognize the inherent godliness, in other people, we wouldn't speak badly of them. We wouldn't murder them. We wouldn't steal from them. We wouldn't make oaths to them that weren't true. It's all very powerful. But what I would like to focus on is lashon hara, the bad speech or gossip. So there's a few different opinions in our writings about what you should say about people. Some people say you shouldn't say anything good at all, because if you're in the presence of someone's enemy and you say they are just amazing and wonderful and good, then their enemy might say, okay, what are you talking about? If you go above and beyond, if it's a little, if you have a little bit of a malicious intent, you're sort of fishing, that's wrong as well. So here's some examples from Pirkei Avot. So Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, one of our great scholars of the Second Temple period, he was big in making Judaism more accessible after the temple was destroyed. He was big into finding ways to replace sacrifices and things. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai had 5 disciples. He used to recount their praise. Okay, so for Eliezer ben Hirkanes, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai would say that he's a plastered well that never loses a drop. For Yoshua ben Hananiah, he would say, happy is the one who gave him birth. For Yossi the priest, he would say he's a pious man. For Shimon ben Natanel, he would say that he's a man who fears sin. And Elazar ben Arach is an ever-flowing spring. I don't know about you, but I didn't hear anything like, he's super nice. He's super great. A plastered well that never loses a drop. Happy is the one who gave him birth. A man who fears sin, and ever-flowing spring. These are so specific, these compliments, these ways of building up his students. I think it's beautiful. Then, of course, we have the next opinion. Rav Dimi said, let no one ever talk in praise of his neighbor, for praise will lead to criticism. Okay, speaking, as we talked about earlier, speaking over the top about someone can encourage someone to speak unkindly of them. But I don't know. I don't think these are over the top, the Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai lines. And what we can learn from this is the value of the type of speech. So, for example, we've talked about this probably before. We have Rabbi Hillel and Rabbi Shammai, and they usually there were the house of Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai, these 2 groups of people who followed these particular rabbis, had varying positions. Hillel's house, Beit Hillel, was a little bit more flexible, a little more about being kind to others and treating others well. And Shammai was more strict, a little more dogmatic. And so the example that's usually given, of the classic example, is that Rabbi Hillel said that you should always tell a bride that she looks beautiful. Rabbi Shammai says, well, what happens if the bride's not actually beautiful? You can't say this to her. You can say, that's a nice dress. You can say, what a lovely party. And I think that's worse. We usually, in the modern day, we usually side with Beit Hillel, the more flexible, the more kind, the less dogmatic. And what the point of this is that to the groom, the bride is beautiful. So it's true in some sense. If it's true in some sense, it's right. And it's kind of to the degree of like using your own judgment of how can we treat everyone with kindness and treat people the way that we want to be treated, like, the sort of ideals of the Torah and of our modern day. But what I like here is that we talk about specific types of speech. So I think it's unkind to say, you were so good, or you were great, or they are nice. That's like extremely unhelpful. I just love the way that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai would talk about his disciples. You can encourage someone and build them up if you find you're not making anything up. You don't have to be untruthful. Just find something positive in someone, and we can always speak well of each other if we really, really look for the positives in one another. We're not expected to say that blah 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 is a great singer if they're not. They could be a really good tap dancer. They could be really good pianists. We have to find the specifics in people. We have to treat people like the individuals that they are and give them the kind of compliments that will encourage them individually, because that's how we can, truly be kind. We say you shouldn't, it's in the Torah that you shouldn't have an ox and a mule pulling the same cart, because an ox is bigger than a mule. It'll be unkind to the mule. The mule will be left behind. The ox will be uneven. Not everything fits everyone. And so I think this sort of, we have to be careful with Lashon Hara, that it's the specific kind of speech that is helpful. So Shabbat Shalom, wishing you a peaceful Shabbat, and God willing, I'll see you all next week.